I talked about some really interesting astrological frameworks and techniques in a recent astrology retreat weekend, so check this out. There'll be some really good tips for you here. Another way to look at the identity and the character of a person astrologically is you can look at the sun as the soul, the universal self, the ascendant and Lagna Lord as the unique self, and the moon as the feelings and the mind. And the moon is always going back and forth between that unique empowered self of the ascendant and that universal transcendent self of the sun, the natural Atmakarika, the sun. So this is another way to try to understand the sun is like that universal self. It's the Karika, or the indicator of that unembodied Atma. Atma means the connection to the universal self. There is only one Atma, Paramatma, supreme self, that everything comes from. And you have a direct connection to that through the sun. Your, quote, enlightenment, final, like, liberation, means it is when your individual identity, your unique identity through the ascendant in this lifetime merges into the universal consciousness of the sun. The way to get there is through the moon, which is the heart. This is why your unique self through the ascendant dissolves into the heart of the moon and leads back to the supreme self of the Paramatman, of the sun. So you can also understand this trimurti, this three-phase quality of evolution. Okay? And again, evaluating those things can be very important. Seeing how that universal self dissolves back into the moon and then tries to connect with that, the unique individual self relaxes into the moon and then connects with the supreme self, the Paramatman. So as I describe it here, the same thing. Unique self through the ascendant is evolving in relationship to the universal self, the Paramatman. The moon goes between the limited experiences through body and mind and the universal self beyond form of the sun. Note, the sun as the universal soul should be understood as an archetype in this context. It is also a worldly force and factor. All planets have this dual nature of something both in this world and beyond it. I will discuss this later in the weekend. This was from the Swiss Army knife course, that direction. But for now, it's crucial to remember that the most important qualities of each person as a living being on earth are shown through the ascendant, that is the unique self in this lifetime. And here's things that you look at: ruling planet and other effects to the truthful identity, as opposed to the third house, which is that ego and that separate identity, that separate self. You remember I discussed it looks very different when someone is not established in their true self of the ascendant, because they get into like behavior and they don't know their true nature. There's not integrity and a continuity of their embodiment. That's what it looks like when the first house and the true self is not established. Third house looks more like willfulness, ego, competition, struggle, desire. So they're very different. So ruling planet and other effects to the truthful identity include the dignity of the ruling planet. Of course, I also talked about things like difficult houses and in those inconjunct places. Other house the ruling planet rules. Like we talked about, we were looking at Gemini charts. Mercury also rules the fourth house. So that shows where the Gemini really has that desire to just do what they want, follow their heart, and just do the things they want to do. Character yogas or Raja yogas affecting the ruling planet. So anytime that ruling planet participates in powerful Raja Yogas, particularly in an angle with a trine lords and angle lords joining with the ruling planet. That really helps to nail the integrity of the person and the identity. House where the ruling planet resides, of course, self-explanatory. Like with Einstein, it was in the 10th house. And again, even though it was debilitated, and that's the big thing people would focus on, what it literally shows is that his path to self-embodiment, unique self-expression, really went through that 10th house, really went through his work, his career. That's how he found himself. So keep that in mind. That house where the ruling planet resides is kind of how we try to find ourselves, right? And so again, when it's in a difficult place, we can often try to find ourselves in something that's very difficult. You know, like if it's in the 6th house, we try to find ourselves through some kind of, you know, struggle or some, you know, and hopefully it can become some kind of service, but we're going to feel that there's difficulty, and we try to find ourselves in that difficulty. If it's in the 11th house, let's say the ruling planet, we try to find ourselves in some sort of public sphere, some kind of community, some kind of group, collective. We really find ourselves there, right? Fifth house in some kind of creative endeavor, etc. Very important. Aspects and conjunctions to the ruling planet. Again, pay attention to the natural and functional status of the affecting planet. So again, any aspects or conjunctions to the ruling planet really shows what affects or influences our journey toward embodying our unique self, right? And again, you have to pay attention not just to the natural quality of the planet, but the functional quality. For instance, Saturn might be joining the ruling planet in a particular house, whatever. Just talked about the house, but if there's a planet there too, you don't just look at the natural quality, but the functional quality. Einstein, because we looked at his chart, for example, his Mercury's in the 10th house, Saturn is there. It's like, oh, Saturn, whoa. Well, Saturn is the 9th lord. It's a planet of heaviness, but for Gemini, it's a great planet. It's their 9th house ruler. In some ways, the most auspicious planet, right? It's also joined the sun, right? And the sun, oh, it's the sun. Well, the sun is a functional malefic for Gemini. It's one of the cruel planets. It's the 3rd lord. So again, you take all things into consideration as obstructions or things that bring assistance to that ruling planet. So planets in the 1st house, coloring the behavior and identity, pay attention to the natural and functional status, again, of affecting planets. So any planets in the 1st house, again, you don't just look at its general nature, but again, because the 1st house is that field of self-expression, you look at not just its natural quality, but its functional status. You know, if someone has a Leo ascendant and they have Mars in the 1st, well, they're still going to have Mars in the 1st house. But that sort of aggressive nature, that sort of pushy nature, for Leo, it's actually kind of it's a Dharma planet. It's their 9th lord. So they'll really follow that vision. And it won't feel so uncomfortable as, let's say, it's a Virgo, where Mars in the 1st house, much more disruptive because it's the 3rd house ruler, the 8th house ruler, not so easy for them to embody. These are principles that most of you have already heard, but it's very important to always evaluate planets that way. So dynamic factors and timing. The chart also shows all the dynamic factors that compel us to incarnate, take form. Those karmic factors from past lives are also subject to the dynamic moment as our lives unfold. The 2 main timing systems are dashas and transits through the sky. So the chart factors, like when you look at the chart, that's a static factor. It means the chart isn't moving. That's the moment you came out. It's already happened. And those Indicators are fixed. That's where they are. That's your pattern, that's your tendency and your nature. But then the dynamic factors, and by the way, that includes that the dasha sequence is a static. It's already set. All of those things that are set are kind of the unalterable trajectory of the life that we are going to live. We know we're going to live it. But of course, the dashas are also dynamic because they're changing. Again, whereas the planetary placements are there, the the dasha sequence is set, but because you're moving into a new one all the time, it's also a dynamic factor. So the dynamic factor here, how the karmas unfold, set at birth in this way, they're also static based on planetary cycles. So in this class, we focus on Vimshottari Dasha. Dashas are the main framework through which our soul life lessons are being learned. They're being taken separate from the character factors above, separate from the static factors. So again, it's important to understand that we all have a general nature that's fixed a certain way. And we can understand the character of the person, their nature, their tendencies. But especially when you're doing readings, and at any moment in time, a different part of that overall nature is going to be more dynamic. Dynamic means alive and moving at any given time. Everyone has a specific dasha priority at any given time. And you can kind of look at the chart as like a tree. And that's like the static factors, it's like this way. And then you maybe look at the dynamic factor like a dasha or transits. It's kind of like a specific branch or section of the tree or fruits on that branch are going to be more important and prevalent at any given time. So as it says, individuals aren't working on all karmas all the time. When we're reading a chart, we're reading a being in time. At certain periods in their life, we're only working on certain things at certain times on a soul level. Those karmas are shown by the dashas. In general, you want to read 2 levels of dashas, maybe down to the 3rd level. That cycle is more than 2 years. Yeah, if the cycle is more than 2 years, maybe go down to the 3rd level. But even then, I generally use 2 levels of dashas, then drill down into the transits as well. So usually 2 levels of dashas and then the transits, and that gives enough movement with the dynamic and static factors. So a few things. You want to see if and when power and character factors are activated by dashas. Often we see that intelligence and special skills and traits do not come forth in their life because the dashas don't run. So for example, you might have all this power concentrated in one area of the chart, but you don't get that full like Mahadasha cycle or that cycle of life that really brings out all of those powerful yogas. Like let's say in Einstein's chart, all those planets in the 10th house and all those yogas or whatever. Of course, Jupiter Dasha would bring that out. Mercury as ruling Revati Nakshatra. But let's say he never got any of those dashas that brought that out. Let's say he was on the other part of the Vimshottari Dasha scheme. Let's say he was born right after, let's say he was born right after Mercury Dasha, right? And, he got, like Ketu, he got like Ketu Dasha and then Venus and then, actually he was right around that sequence. But let's say he never got the planet, let's say that he never got Jupiter Dasha, because Jupiter rules all of that. Then even though there's a lot of yogas in there, some of them aren't really coming out, because the rulerships are what make the yogas happen. So again, there could be, just to understand that there could be a lot of unfulfilled potential. Don't think just because you see, let's say, a lot of yogas or a lot of things, that the person is going to get the full benefit of those. Sometimes it doesn't come out. So you always want to keep that in mind. And these are things that can be frustrating to people at times. You'll see someone with all this potential, especially, I don't want to say especially for work and career, but it's often one of the frustrations. Like there's all this power that the person wants to bring out. And you see all these planets like in the 10th or Raja Yogas with the 10th house ruler, but their dashas never line up. Or maybe they got the dasha when they were really young. you know, so that's a huge thing to look at. So, in general, dasha planets give the results of what they rule. Note, we'll discuss exact way to read the dashas later in the weekend. So those of you who have studying with me know these rules of that the planets give the results of their dashas based on what they rule through Rashi and Nakshatra. Very simple rules. So transits show planets moving through the sky, interacting with the chart factors and dashas. The transits show worldly outside factors influencing us as we learn the deeper soul lessons shown by the dashas. So the dashas are really the main things that are unfolding at any given time. Those dasha lessons, or the lessons that come from what the dasha planets are ruling, are really where it starts. And then the transits lay within that. So you'll often see big things happen when the dashas and transits line up. Like someone will be in a Rahu Dasha or something, and then Rahu will be going through the first house or something, boom. Or like a Rahu Subdasha or whatever it is. It's getting activated, and then the transit is there. Then you'll see big shifts happen. These are also often when people are getting readings. And this is why I've always encouraged my students, you don't really see these kinds of things. The reason I know all this is because I've been doing a lot of readings. Because when you're just kind of playing around with people's charts and, oh, let me look at that, oh yeah, and you're not really engaged, you're not seeing the dynamic stuff popping out. You're just kind of looking at charts here and there. When the karmas aren't ripe and hot, then you're not going to see the things I'm talking about as much. And so, as I say, often these are challenging factors and pressures as the transits of Saturn and the nodes. The nodal axis is always important. Regardless of dashas, Jupiter is also important, showing the grace flowing in certain area of life for a year. So you want to always be looking at Saturn as a 2.5-year transit. In every reading, every situation, you want to know where Saturn's bringing that pressure. You want to look at both ends of the lunar nodal axis, the nodal axis, Rahu and Ketu. Which house axis is it going over? Is it going over any planets in that axis? Again, we can have some are quite important, especially the 1-7, the 4-10. Again, those are relationships and career axis. But any place where people have natal charts, particularly if they're getting activated by the dashas, when nodes or Saturn or Jupiter goes over, again, because they're at least about a year long, big things happen. So you always need to look at that in every reading. They're going to be important wherever those transits are. So again, as I say, you want to look at that. We also need to notice retrograde cycles of planets. Again, especially in the natal chart, and see if they're running dasha of a retrograde planet. And also in the sky as the retrograde cycles go back and forth, if they're going back and forth, again, particularly over these sensitive points. You know, especially Jupiter and Saturn, they're retrograde, you know, a third of the time, a half of the time close with Saturn. If it's going to go back and forth over an exact position, well, it's always going to go back and forth over something, but if a person has a planet there, of course, if it's the Ascendant, the Moon, the Dasha planet, then pay close attention to it. As again, those retrograde cycles lengthen the amount of time faster or slowing moving planets will move in one sign. So we need to look at transits to important planets in the natal chart. So again, these are, important ways to approach evaluating charts. So this overview of static and dynamic factors would include, you have to look at, look over the chart for the ascendant. Of course, what's the ascendant? Go deeply into all those things I mentioned earlier. The ascendant ruler, where it goes, what else is there as described above. Character yogas and factors described above. Dasha planets down to a couple levels. The houses that the planet rules. Right? Any planet, within the Dasha cycle. Other planets ruled by the Dasha planets. Like if you're running Mercury Dasha and there are planets in Revati Nakshatra, those planets. Planets in Virgo, those planets. Current transits over slow-moving planets. Again, this overview of static and dynamic factors. Current transits of slow-moving planets. Slow-moving means Jupiter, Saturn, or the nodes. This is the kind of overview scan that you want to be looking at when you're about to be doing readings especially. you'll pretty much always notice that there's a important connection to these transiting planets with every reading that you're doing. Okay, they're always going to be interacting with important factors in the chart, often with the Dasha planets, and you'll always be mentioning these things to some extent. So the static factors in greater depth, these are some things that are also very important that I talked about in the Swiss Army knife course that I also just wanted to put out there so that we've mentioned it. Sometimes I just want to mention things because then once we start looking at charts, I want to be able to say, see, remember when I said that before? Here it is. I don't want to have to be explaining it on the fly. I want to have it out there. So after scanning the ascendant, the ruler, aspects, dignities, yogas, dharma planets, we need to go a little deeper. Below are a few important things to also scan for, interpret, and understand. Now evaluate the 3 karakas. This is very important when you're trying to evaluate anything like relationships. Venus is the natural karaka. The house ruler would be the 7th house ruler for relationships, and then any planets in that house, like any planets in the 7th house. So if you're wanting to understand relationships, first you evaluate Venus, then you evaluate the 7th house ruler, then you evaluate planets in the 7th house to see the nature of the situation. So you need to evaluate the 3 karakas. You want to also look for times when those things pile up, like for Mars-ruled people, there's only one karaka, it's Venus. Venus rules the 7th house and it's the karaka and it's the same planet. Right? For Scorpio, Jupiter is a double karaka for children. It rules the 5th house and it's the karaka for children. Same way with Leo and Jupiter. So you want to notice those times when that happens. Now, exchanges. Planets in each other's signs strengthen what they agree on, fight over what they don't, but usually it shows success, but maybe not joy or wisdom. So you get an exchange between 2 friendly planets. Again, an exchange means like, Mercury is in Libra and Venus is in Virgo. Okay? They're in each other's signs. Because Mercury rules Virgo and Venus rules Libra, when you get one in the other signs, they're exchanging. Now, Mercury and Venus are friendly with each other. So they agree on a lot, so that is a pretty friendly exchange. And again, with the exchanges, the things they agree on get really strengthened. The things they don't become points of contention, but regardless, it's usually leads to some kind of success, like the fruition of whatever it is you want to be happening. It usually, because it's like you stay with it until it's finished, because it's like a circuit. It's like a complete circuit when planets exchange. Again, let's say instead of it being Mercury and Venus, let's say it's Jupiter and Venus. Now they're mutually inimical to each other. They don't agree on a whole lot. Let's say Jupiter in Taurus and Venus in Sagittarius. All right? They're exchanging. Jupiter's in Venus' sign, Venus in Jupiter's sign. Well, they're going to disagree about a whole lot. But even through the disagreement, they're going to cooperate and and eventually satisfy the desires. And the desires are related to the houses they rule. They're going to be ruling different houses. So again, it's all cooked into the same thing. Because if Jupiter, let's say that it's for Gemini. Or no, let's say Cancer. Let's use another example. So for Cancer, Jupiter rules the 6th and 9th house, and Venus rules the 4th and 11th house. So if you get Jupiter and Venus exchanging, you have these houses that are very in conjunct each other. 6th, 9th, 4th, 11th, and they're kind of grappling with something, right? Venus is trying to make the 4th and 11th house things happen. The beautiful home, the ambition to have the beautiful home, the motivation to feel calm and peaceful, right? Meanwhile, Jupiter, 6th and 9th house ruler, shows where Cancer is always following their higher higher principles, but they might, get into some struggles over it. They might struggle over principles, and, they wind up, feeling the struggle to stay, hopeful. But that struggle to stay hopeful actually gives them a lot of grace, and helps them grow in inspiration. So now you got these two things just kind of pulling at each other a little bit, right? But the things they share in common will benefit eventually, which means greater teaching, greater learning different things in different ways. Venus is very worldly, Jupiter is very otherworldly. Those houses, things get sort of pulled at, but eventually it works out. And usually the desires get fulfilled, but there's all of that inner conflict going on. So this is how you would understand that, but exchanges are really powerful, especially when you're reading the chart, you should be able to see, and you'll be able to see the effect of the exchange based on the desires they're trying to fulfill at that time. You'll see the person will be like, okay, I'm in this relationship. Again, Venus is karaka of relationships, but there's this struggle, we have very different philosophies about life, and, he's very much a kind of workaholic, and I'm just wanting to have a beautiful family. I don't know, whatever the heck it is. It's like, urgh. And they'll tend to stay engaged because of the exchange. So exchanges are really important in this way. And it really brings out your understanding of houses, of the relationship between planets. And when the dashas trigger a planet that's in an exchange, it brings up that struggle and the eventual situation happening, and being, in some ways, also being kind of stuck in the situation. Because we keep going back to it, keep going back and forth in it, trying to get it to work out. So Vipreet Raj Yoga's difficult house rulers and difficult houses show the difficulties destroyed, learning how to explain each one. So again, 6th house ruler in the 8th, 8th house ruler in the 12th, etc. shows difficulties getting destroyed and problems getting taken away, for example. Neecha Bhanga Yoga is modifying debilitation based on important factors. So again, the Neecha Bhanga, we saw that in Einstein's chart. Mercury's debilitated, Venus is exalted, very powerful, Neecha Bhanga. Retrograde planets, indications shown by the planet backup and create confusion. This confusion creates an inner relationship with the planet, but the outer results shown by it don't manifest easily. So again, retrograde, it tends to disrupt our forward motion with that energy, and in so doing, it becomes a very personal, internal factor. So like Venus retrograde, the relationships might be confusing about how to move forward, but in that confusion, we actually connect to something more internal. So combust planets, when they get too close to the sun, their rays get burnt up and it creates a touchy flashpoint. With that planet combustion, we often feel, again, like a little bit, as I say, touchy or frustrated. There's a Sanskrit word that says kopa, which means frustrated. And it's often because of the nature of that planet. Like with Mercury, we might be very, very touchy about our speech, be nervous about saying the wrong thing, or not being appreciated for when we say things. Maybe we grew up that way where we would say something and it was just kind of ignored or marginalized. So then we feel very insecure about it. Watch the combustion. So hemming, positive or negative effects on houses and planets when benefics or malefics are in adjacent houses. Explain how 3 houses lead to one another. So this hemming is again in adjacent houses. Like if you have Mercury in the 12th house and Venus in the 2nd house, then you have two benefic planets adjacent to the 1st house, hemming the 1st house. If they're difficult planets, Saturn in one and Mars in the other, then you have a malefic hemming, difficult hemming. And I said, explain how 3 houses lead to another. Again, it's very important to understand this 3-house concept. One thing leads to another thing, leads to the next thing. And so when a house is hemmed, the house that leads to it has stress or ease, and the house after it has stress or ease. So knowing how to explain that, hemming is very important. The house that's hemmed or the planet that's hemmed gets quite affected for benefit, for good or bad by hemming. Exact degrees by aspect or transit and or in all situations, look for exact degrees. And so again, there's a general quality of a planet, let's say Saturn moves into by transit moves into a new sign. And it's like 1 degree, and you have a planet at 15 degrees of that sign. Well, you'll feel it as soon as it crosses over, because it's like it's in the house. And think of it this way. Think of someone just entering one side of your house, and you're over at this side of the house. You see it, and it's there. And the influence is felt because he's in your house. But let's say you're here, and then the person comes closer and closer and closer and closer, and eventually he's right here. Well, now you feel him a lot more. Now he's right up in your grill. Right now he's right in your face. So that's what exact degrees do. And it's not just by conjunction, but aspect as well. And not just by transit, but in the natal chart. Pay very close attention to aspects that are really right on top of each other. Again, you have the same principle by aspect. You could have that Saturn, let's say in the natal chart, he's at 1 degree. And then opposite that house, there's a planet in the opposite sign, but at 25 degrees. Well, that's a pretty wide aspect. Again, you'll still feel it. You'll still feel it. But it's literally 24 degrees away from the aspect. That's almost a full sign. So all those things matter. And they matter when you see them. Again, just to cut off the question, well, how do we know when to pay attention? How do we know to integrate all of that? These are always the big questions. Well, what if I see this and how do I know this? You know it when it shows up. You don't see, it's not always relevant because there's not always the situation. You look for it and you pay attention to it. Pay attention when you get a bunch of planets in one signs, which ones are exact degrees? Which ones are closer to each other? You again notice these things, just pay attention to them. So again, special planets for each ascendant. I already mentioned this, but it's important. The different areas of life when Karaka and House Ruler are the same planet. There's an extreme focus on that one planet for Scorpio, Aries, and Leo mainly. I say those mainly because, with Venus for the 2 Mars-ruled signs, and also Scorpio and Leo for Jupiter. So these are like the static factors in greater depth, which means when you're looking at a chart, the static factors, again, are the things that are just fixed. You're looking at the chart, and that's the way the chart is set up. Now, again, I did mention, especially with exact degrees and other things, it's also a dynamic factor. But in the chart as well, just in the regular chart, when you're looking at things, that's what these static factors in greater depth, some things to really make sure to not overlook. And again, there's a lot of things to look at, but these are some of the things beyond what you've already learned or beyond what you might be looking for. These are very important. So dynamic factors in greater depth, dashas in greater detail. In the dasha cycles, the planets activate what they are as a karaka and then what they rule through sign and nakshatra. You've probably heard me say this a lot. Hopefully you're actually using it. Because so many of you students that have been studying with me for years, and we start looking at a chart, and I'm like, so what's happening in the dasha cycle? Jupiter. So what's Jupiter saying? Well, Jupiter's in the 8th house. Okay, and it's aspected by this, and it's blah, blah. And I'm like waiting for the light bulb to go off, and it's like, and it rules blah, blah, blah. This should be the first thing you look at in any dasha planet. What does it rule? Please remember, what does it rule through Rashi and Nakshatra? What houses? So first, of course, it's a Karaka. Activate what they are as a Karaka. It's Jupiter. It's the Karaka of teachers, children, expansion, philosophies. And it's the ruler of the 8th and 11th house for Taurus. So Jupiter is the 8th and 11th lord. And any planets in Sagittarius or Pisces, or Punarvasu, Vishaka, and Purvabhadra. That's what Jupiter rules. All the time. Okay? Special dasha moments that make things happen. Again, for dashas, these are really the things to pay attention to. When both the sign ruler and the nakshatra ruler are the mahadasha and the subdasha. So, for example, let's say someone has a planet in Scorpio in Anuradha nakshatra. So there's going to be two very pivotal, crucial dashas that activate that planet. Let's say it's the sun. The sun is in Anuradha nakshatra. Anuradha is ruled by, it's in Scorpio and Anuradha. Mars rules Scorpio, Saturn rules Anuradha in the dasha scheme. So Saturn-Mars or Mars-Saturn is going to really activate that planet because both rulers are active in the dasha and subdasha scheme. And there's no hierarchy. One's not more important if it's Rashi or Nakshatra. Either one. So when you see both rulers of a planet, activated on the two levels of dasha, pay close attention to that. Special moments, dasha moments that make things happen. That's a huge one. Second, when the Mahadasha planet rules the Subdasha planet. So in the example I just used, I said Sun in Anuradha, which is of course Scorpio. So if you're in Mars, Sun, well now the Mahadasha planet is ruling the Subdasha planet. Boom, that's going to really pop out. It would also really pop out in Saturn, Sun. Because Saturn, the ruler of Anuradha, is ruling the Sun. Very specific. When you get the Mahadasha planet ruling the Subdasha planet, huge shifts happen. And again, the other one is both rulers ruling the planet. By the way, especially the Mahadasha planet ruling the Subdasha planet, you also need to check the harmonic charts. That's where you see it as well. You see the same power in the harmonic charts. But of course, there are no nakshatras in harmonic charts. Get the thought out of your mind. Anyone saying that, it's just totally scientifically unsound. So in harmonic charts, Rashi's, the Rashi Lord ruling the Samdasha planet, huge things happen in that area of life. So Sun in Scorpio, let's say it's a Taurus person, in Mars Sun Dasha, the Mahadasha planet is ruling the Sun, which is the fourth lord. It's going to have huge things in that chart. Let's say it's the D10 in the career. It could be like if someone's doing real estate, that would be huge. Because now the fourth house ruler, which is the indicator of real estate, in the D10 is getting blown open by the Mahadasha planet ruling the Subdasha planet. For example. All these factors shown in harmonic charts, as I said. Now again, these dynamic factors in depth as it relates to transits. So transits over the Mahadasha planet, very important. Someone is in the, again, let's say they're in the Dasha of Mars. And in the natal chart, they have Mars in Capricorn. Okay, planets as they go through Capricorn are hitting that Mahadasha planet. Saturn goes through Capricorn. It's going to be going over that Dasha planet the whole time that Saturn is there. And same principle I just said, pay attention to exact degrees. It's going to really affect it when it gets right on top of it. If Mars is at 25 degrees, you'll still feel the transit of Saturn over and affecting it, but it's going to really affect it as it gets very close. And that includes every planet as it goes through Capricorn, if that's where the Dasha planet is. Every month, the moon is going to go over it, for example. By the way, this also applies to aspects by transit. So if it's 22 Capricorn, as planets go through 22 Cancer, they're going to be aspecting that Mahadasha planet. Aspects by transit are also very important. So other important, and I say this, I have it right there, planetary aspects by transit are also important. And again, the same principle, exact degrees matter when you start to see it line up. And again, this is especially important with slower moving planets that start to line up and aspect Dasha planets. And again, I know this because I've been watching this for decades at this point. A decade and a half. That's how I know this, because I watch it. And I've watched it for a long time. You feel the effect, and then when stuff starts to come to the point where now you have to do something, that's when the aspect gets really right on top of it. You started to feel the thing once the planet entered the house, or once the aspect started to form, you started to feel it. But now as it gets closer and closer, now this situation is like, now I got to do something. That's right when people get readings or you see things happen. Okay, so transit to the ruling planet or first house. Again, whatever that ruling planet is, let's say someone is Virgo and the ruling planet is Mercury. Mercury is in Cancer. Okay, anytime something goes over that ruling planet, goes through Cancer. Again, regardless of the dasha, but you always look at the dashas as they line up as well. But transits to that ruling planet, where it is in the chart, and or the first house. Of course, anytime planets would, if it's Virgo, anytime a planet would go through Virgo, especially one of the slow-moving planets, Jupiter would be for about a year, Rahu or Ketu about a year and a half, Saturn about 2.5 to 3 years. That's going to be shifting the person's awareness, consciousness, identity during that time. Again, Mars might go through it for a couple months. Mars is retrograde, it might be 6 months. And you can even just look at the slower moving planets too, like Venus and Mercury are still like about a month. So again, you can still see this. So transit to the 7th house or ruler for relationships, 10th house ruler for career. Same principle as this, but again, these are just important spots that we're always looking at. People are always interested in finding out about. Transit to the 7th house or 7th house ruler for relationships, 10th house ruler for the career. Very important. Planetary aspects by transit are also important. As I said, exact degrees. Now I have Baladi, especially planets in very early and late degrees must be paid attention to. They become unreliable. So this is the concept called sandhi. The concept of sandhi is when planets enter or leave houses. Let me take a drink here. And those sandhi planets, they take a while to get set up. Again, particularly slower moving planets. Saturn might take a week or two, at least about a week or two to get from the last degree or so of one sign into the first degree of the next. It's like creeping along. And so that's very important as well. So in this weekend, even though in the manual it says harmonic charts and all these other things that are here, we didn't really go into that in this weekend. At least explicitly, I didn't teach all of this. We looked at some of the principles, but I didn't go over this. So this was the last part of the first day that didn't record. There were some other questions and conversations also that I can't recreate. But this was the material that I made sure that everyone went over, and this certainly sums up, and in fact, I actually explained it with much more depth